Hello everyone, welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode I want to help you re-find your triathlon mojo if you've lost it. Now, if you've been in the sport of triathlon for long enough, there will have come a point where you go to start training for the next season and you just can't seem to get yourself started. It's not that you don't want to. It's almost like you're trying to start an old generator or a bike. You're trying to turn it over. You're there, you're trying, giving it a pull, but the engine just isn't starting right. Check the choke. Try again. Oh, I think we might have flooded the engine. Give it a bit of time. Try it again. That inherent drive and desire and hunger that we had to train all the time, it's just not quite there as it was before. It doesn't mean that we don't love the sport. It's not that at all. It's rather that we need to reframe things in our mind perhaps, and I'm going to share with you some tips and ideas of ways that you can help to rekindle this. Now, I'll be honest, there is nothing that I or anyone else is going to be able to say or do that's going to help you to be able to re-find that hunger and that enthusiasm that you had when you first started the sport, okay? It's impossible to recreate that. However, what I can do is I can hopefully help you reframe things in your mind in a way that can help you stay in the sport for as long as you want to, because apparently 92% of triathletes want to keep doing this for life. So there's clearly a very innate desire, but the ability between thinking to yourself, yes, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, and actually be able to get yourself out the door doing those long sessions, there can be a gap there, and I'm going to try and close that gap in this episode. Now, my first tip, I think, is going to be the most important one, and that is that you have to re-find your why, because your why has probably changed. So when I first started out in triathlon about 14 years ago, my why was that I was lacking in self-esteem and purpose. And there are very few things that can improve your sense of purpose and self-esteem as triathlon. And when I went through that phase from not being able to swim freestyle, not being able to run at all, just riding a mountain bike occasionally, when I went on that journey to becoming a triathlete, and then over the years all the way to becoming an Ironman finisher, that was massive. That was an insane journey for me to go on. And now that I have a pretty high level of self-esteem, I don't need that triathlon training to bring me that level of self-esteem as I did in the past. Now, many people are spurred into action to take on a triathlon due to some kind of event in their lives. So that could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a health scare that they've had. It could be they look in the mirror and they realise that they don't like who it is that they've become. And they go out and they use triathlon as a vehicle to address this, or in some cases to fix this, to take on a challenge in the memory of a loved one perhaps. And they achieve this, and then, they want to keep doing it because of how great the training and the event made them feel, but they've lost that why. It's not as strong as it was before, and I'll be honest, that why may never be as strong again. But you do need to reframe the question. You can't expect what it was that motivated you when you first started triathlon to be the same thing that's going to motivate you several years down the line. I mean, Jan Frodeno, incredibly successful triathlete who most of you will have heard of, he put a post out on social media the other day, and he was talking about how what gets you through year 3 won't get you through year 13. And this is really true, because our relationship is going to change with the sport over the years. And I want you to think about it as being the relationship with your husband or wife or long-term partner, which I imagine most of you will have at least an appreciation of what that looks like. When you first meet someone, it's all very exciting. You both want to spend every waking moment with each other. By the time that you're 5-10 years down the line, That's changed. It's hopefully it's not the fact that that your feelings towards them have changed dramatically. You still love them. But how many people do you know who've been together for 40, 50 years who can't keep their hands off each other? It's the fact is that love is still there, but it's changed. We need to acknowledge that's changed and that we're not broken. There's nothing wrong with us if we're not feeling that same hunger and desire that we were previously. Now, unfortunately, if your why was to get you out of a situation you were in with regards to your health or your appearance or anything like that, that's the sort of the idea of reverting back to that state. It can be useful. It can be helpful to help you sort of to stay on track with your training, but often it's not really enough. There often needs to be something a bit more than that, because if you think, oh, I was using triathlon to lose this weight and I've put a little bit back on now, you could do training for a few months and you could revert back to the state you were before and go, oh, okay, job's done. So it's that isn't necessarily the incredibly sort of impactful way of sort of motivating you that it may have been in the past. So you need to look at yourself and need to go, well, this is a question only really you can answer. But you need to have a much clearer idea in your head as you go through sort of your triathlon career, as it were, for want of a better term. Why is it that I'm still training? Now, a lot of us, we could look at, the aging process. We could go, well, if I'm swimming, cycling, running, lifting weights and looking after what I eat, that's going to change how I age. And yes, it will have a massive impact on your independence, your health, your happiness, all of these different factors, your appearance even as you get older. So that could be a new motivator that you turn to. That could be a new why. It could be that now that you have gained that sense of self-esteem by completing that first event, that you want to do a longer event, that you want to do an event faster. It could be that you want to qualify for a World Championship event, okay? There are a huge amount of possibilities of different ways, different sort of whys that we can find. But you need to refine that why. You need to write it down, maybe put it up somewhere where you can see it if you need to. You need to find a reason for you to keep training. Because if you don't, you're really going to struggle to find consistency. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about is the sort of obsession, almost, the emphasis even that we put on Ironman. Now, when somebody starts triathlon, no matter what their first race is, the vast majority of us, we're going to be thinking, I'd love to do an Ironman one day. Because just the size of the challenge and the aura of the brand, all this, it really draws people in. And it's really critical, I think, that we sort of remember, once we've completed our Ironman, that there is more to the sport. And, someone like me, when I first started out, I did sprints, and then at the end of my first year, I did an Olympic. And I built up, and then sort of did a 70.3 further down the line, and then I think it was 7 years before I started training, before I actually completed an Ironman. So I was having fun with the shorter stuff. And we get to the point where a lot of people will finish an Ironman and they'll think, well, why would I do anything shorter? I remember chatting to someone who struggled to motivate themselves to get back into training after finishing an Ironman. Because in their own words, this was at a training session. They said to me, well, I can swim 3.8 kilometres, I can cycle 180 kilometres and then run a marathon at the end. Like, why would I need to prove that I can do anything more? And the issue is that Ironman is incredibly demanding as an event. And the result of this is that the volume of training that we need to do to be able to competently complete an event is huge. And the ability to keep turning up and keep knocking out all of these training sessions to allow it to dominate our weekend. In some cases, it can, really sort of take over our life to an extent if you really want to be competitive, if you want to be around that kind of 10 hour mark. The volume of training that's needed to maintain that level is huge. And if you go into season 3 or 4 of Ironman training, I mean, you can't blame someone for just not having that same drive for that training they did previously. And so taking on shorter distances can be really critical. Now, I know some people, sort of a friend of mine from a club that I used to be a member of, he loves Ironman. He loves the brand. He's really bought into it. And he would always complain that he was very slow. But the thing is, the shortest event that he ever did was a 70.3. And his training never really reflected somebody who actually wanted to get faster. He just loved doing the events. And I don't want to take that away from him for a moment. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure if if he's done anything in the last couple of years. I think he has. It's been a while since I've seen anything coming from his feed, actually. But just because he's not updating his social media feed doesn't mean he's still not doing it. But if he really wanted to improve his run, as was his desire, then actually spending some time targeting shorter events, it's a different challenge. We're not simply out there putting in the big volume, the big training sessions, dedicating a whole weekend to swimming, cycling and running. We may still include some decent sessions, but we're going to include more in the way of speed work, of strength work, all of that's needed to actually take our speed to the next level. So if you had somebody who's been doing the last sort of 3 or 4 years where they've been focusing on Ironman, if you take a year where you focus on sort of sprint and Olympic and maybe do a 70.3 at the end, that can be a real change in training for you, in stimulus. Mentally, it's going to have an enormous impact. Not only that, but when you go back to the Ironman distance, you'll be faster than you were previously. There's less pressure because there's less focus on one day. If you're doing shorter events and you have a bit of a howler, I mean, it happens to all of us. You can head back a few weeks later and have another crack. This is still within the sport of triathlon, but I would love it if more people remove the idea of Ironman as being this holy grail, as being something that everyone needs to work towards and spend all their time, focus and energy on. Oh, gotta get to Kona. Because a lot of people, they get to Kona, they race and they never touch their bike again because they feel, again, they've completed it. They've done it. So I really would encourage people to kind of to spread their wings, to start to look at, other targets other than simply doing Ironman year after year, trying to get to Kona. Try to find that kind of, that love for the process and, different forms of triathlon instead of hyper fixating on this one brand, this one race, on this one target you have. Something else I want to draw attention to, rather than just different distances, is different formats. Now, you may not even know this, some people, but not only do we have triathlon as a sport within, our sort of sphere of multi-sport, I guess, we also have duathlon, aquathlon, aquabike, swim run, and, others out there. So let's start off by looking at duathlon. This is a popular winter sport, and this is something that I think is really helpful for triathletes to target in the winter months. And it's a run, bike, run format, and honestly, it's pretty tough on the legs. It's hard going, duathlon. It's definitely not the easier version of a triathlon. That second run, it really will put you in a difficult spot. So I do like it when triathletes target duathlons in the winter because, well, character building for a start, but also they give us something to aim for. They give us some stepping stones. If somebody's starting training in November for a race which is in sort of June, July time, okay, that's a reasonably good time to start training especially if it's an Ironman. If we're starting training this far out, then it's quite hard to motivate ourselves to get all the way until May when there'll be that first event. When the water temperature gets high enough for us to be able to swim in open water, in the UK at least. Mid-May is generally speaking the earliest triathlons. That's a long way of just doing lots of long rides, lots of long runs, getting to the pool. Like training is a little bit of a grind. I'm afraid there's no way of getting around that. If a training plan is whiz and pops and that all over the place, it's probably not super effective. And you do have to, of course, find a balance in your mind of what's actually motivating for you, what's interesting, what's going to keep you turning up, and what is optimal. It may be that you go, well, actually, I'm going to step away from this super optimized training. I'm just going to have a bit of fun with it for a year. Sure, like, why not? Absolutely, I encourage that. But if you are looking to take on sort of this event that you have coming up in the summer, and the training is just a little bit of a drag, and you can't really see anything kind of, in your near future that's worth kind of turning up and putting in the sessions for, it's not super motivating. If, however, you have a duathlon on the calendar, if you know that you're going to be racing in January, in February, and you're going to turn up and you're going to toe a start line, that suddenly it's going to get you out on days when you maybe try and find a reason to explain to yourself, oh, actually, I think I'm a bit tired, or I'm not sure, I'm just not sure I'm feeling this. If you have a duathlon in the calendar, it's a nice little stepping stone. Now, it doesn't have to be a duathlon, it could be a half marathon. There are all sorts of events out there that you can target. But these are fantastic to have as these little stepping stones that you always have something that you're working towards. Now, it could be that, you may have listened to my other podcast. You may have gone, oh, well, Simon's talked about the importance of not over racing, of not going super hard and super deep, all the time with these races, because you won't be able to perform as well as you can on your race day. Now, if somebody's building towards their first event, or like a massive event they've invested a lot of time and money and energy in, then yeah, that's pretty solid advice. There's a reason I give it, Over racing is definitely a way to find yourself in a constant cycle of taper and recovery, to the point that you're not actually really getting the sessions in that you need to be doing to get faster for your big event. But if you don't have a massive A race, if you don't have this one day that you're really working towards, I don't generally like seasons, like personally for my own training, I don't like seasons that revolve completely around a single day. Some people love it. They won't do any other races all year. They'll just have their Ironman and they'll train like a monk. They'll turn up, they'll do their race, and that's it. You know what? Fair enough. But it's not for me. So I would encourage people to have some races booked in. And if you're struggling for motivation to get out the door, look, have yourself a little race every month if that's what's going to keep you in the sport and keep you turning up and enjoying it. There is a difference between what is optimal and what is realistic, what's pragmatic, what's motivating. And these are far more important. If you're coming into a season and you're just not finding that same kind of desire as you did before, you know what? If you want to turn up, if you want to knock out these smaller races, do it, I say. So I'm getting a little bit sidetracked there, wasn't I? I was meant to be talking about duathlon. But what if duathlon's not for you? What if you just don't like running? And let's face it, it's a lot of running in a duathlon. Well, what about aquabike? That is a format where you do a swim, followed by a cycle, and that's the end of the race. And this is a format that when I first started in triathlon, it was what they call sort of a triathlete's graveyard. Triathletes who sort of get injured or can no longer run for whatever reason, they find themselves at a stage where they go, you know what, I just want to do the swim and the bike. I don't enjoy the run anymore. But as a format, it's really blown up in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, really, where a lot more people are doing it. It's less a case of people who want to do a full triathlon but can't, and you've got people who just don't really want to do the run. They don't enjoy the run training. They get injured too much and it affects other areas. So they go, you know what? I just want to do the swim and the bike. Alternatively, You've got aquathlon, which is a swim followed by a run. And this is actually a budget-friendly introduction to the sport, especially if it's a pool swim. Because you can fit in sort of a swim, you're just sort of doing a pool swim, getting some running trainers. That is a pretty cheap event. No wetsuit, no bike, a lot more affordable. And there are a lot of venues, sort of lidos, lakes, which will offer an aquathlon. As it's a fantastic way for you to be able to sort of keep yourself moving and, sort of take on challenges which may be, just a bit more sort of fun, dare I say it. And then, as well as the sort of the traditional multi-sport, different triathlon variations, you've also got swim run, which started off in Northern Europe. And the format was sort of start off, swim to an island, run across the island, swim to the next one, run across that island to the next one. And you keep completing this. And it's really popular. It's taken off. It's a relatively new format, but it sort of really is massive. Sort of the Attilo swim run events, are huge. Now it is a little bit more left field because you have to swim in the same gear that you're running in. So people have a swim run it's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? Swim run wetsuit, where it will be sort of quite a short wetsuit, and it won't be maybe as tight in some areas as others. It will try to reduce the chance of chafing. You'll be swimming in your running shoes. There is a huge a huge amount of considerations for these events, and it's something that I've never done one. I don't know an enormous amount about it. I'd love to have a crack one day. But some of these races, they can be really long. You can be doing sort of 12 kilometres of swimming and sort of over a marathon length in runs in some events. They are serious tests of endurance. And what's nice about these is, they all tend to be off-road, and there's a real sense of adventure there. And speaking of off-road, there are a lot of events out there that are sort of trail triathlons. Even if you're not looking at Xterra, if you look at some events such as even like the Brutal Triathlon, which is held in North Wales. I mean, the ride, admittedly is on road, but the runs are on trails. You're going up mountains for large amounts of it. It really is, that next level of challenge. Yes, I know it's not the Ironman brand. I know there isn't that same level of spectator sport. I know it's open roads rather than closed. But the idea of finishing a run by running up Snowdon, what a challenge. If that isn't interesting and motivating to you, I mean, I guess for some people they find that intimidating. But if you find something intimidating, embrace it, learn it, develop it. It's like somebody who just I'm a slow triathlete. Well, like I said earlier, go on an adventure of getting faster. Do it in the correct way. There are all of these different avenues, these little side quests that we can do to take on these events, which are going to push us in different ways. Something else we can do to, relight a bit of a fire in our belly is to make our training a bit more social. Now, just because training on your own may be the optimal way to train, doesn't mean it's the only way to train. And, this is a balance. Do you necessarily want to join a road cycling group where, every ride is a sort of a mini race? Well, probably not. But if you can find somebody near you who has similar goals, similar mindset, similar level of fitness, there's no real reason that you can't head out on a ride with them. And having that social aspect, not only is it a bit more motivating to get out and to spend some social time, there's also a level of accountability. If you know that there are people who are going to be waiting for you on this ride, especially if it's a small group. If it's a big group, then it's not so much, guess what, Simon's not making it this week. Oh, well, whatever, we'll just leave without him. But if I'm just heading off with sort of two friends or one friend, I know that they're both expecting a social ride, and the knowledge that somebody's going to be, at the end of the road waiting for me, that's going to get me out when I might not otherwise. And 9 times out of 10, if we're struggling to motivate ourselves to get out and to do a session, by the time we're actually doing the session, we think to ourselves, you know what, I'm so glad I did this, and I didn't talk myself out of it. And this can add a real aspect to it. Now, Does this mean you might not be able to stay perfectly in zone 2 for your whole session? You know what? It might. Is there a chance you might end up stopping at a cafe stop, or having to wait while a friend of yours repairs the puncture? Yeah, there's a chance of that. But a ride like that is better than no ride. And that's something that, people are sort of perfectionists. I want to do it properly, I won't do it at all. But that's a recipe for just not getting, sort of achieving your goals, not being able to sort of enjoy this healthy lifestyle that you found yourself enjoying. So making it social can be really powerful. Now, if you are sort of swimming, then that can be really helpful. If you're getting through a tough swim set together as part of a squad, really helpful. Running, again, it can be quite chatty if you're going along, enjoying a run with someone. I think it's such a good idea. Now, it doesn't have to be every week. It could only be once a month if you'd like it that way. If you're struggling with that motivation, getting some other people involved, it can be really super helpful. What if it's, sort of your other half wants to go out for a ride with you, and you know that you're going to be riding really slowly? Well, embrace it, It doesn't matter if you don't nail all of your sessions every weekend. Move away from that perfectionist mindset, trying to find joy and happiness in the training, and that can mean sharing it with other people. It's really powerful. So yeah, I recommend finding that sense of community if you can. Something else you can do to liven up your training is to find new routes. Now, one of the things that was so exciting to us about triathlon when we started is that we used running and cycling as a way to explore the area around us. That is discovering sort of cycling on roads that we never actually driven down because we had no need to. They turned out to be sort of pleasant country lanes, good cycling roads. Or we could have got the OS map out, or another detailed mapping system in another country. And we looked at all of the little footpaths, byways, bridleways, all these places that we could go running. I mean, I'm very lucky living where I do in the UK, in that I have lots of little networks of footpaths around me. Now, sometimes you'll find this footpath on an OS map and go, oh, I never even knew that was there before. Let's go enjoy it on a run. And you feel like it's a bit of an adventure, It really is more motivating to go out and to explore a little bit of footpath or tarmac you've never explored before. Now, sometimes you get there and you find the footpath is overgrown, nobody's maintained it for years. Sometimes it's a quagmire. There's always reasons, but I'd much rather somebody investigates these things and has this little bit of, let's see where that path goes. Let's add this bit on, see how we get on. That is just really motivating. To sort of get back to exploring, really, and finding these new areas. No, don't get me wrong, I have favourite training routes that I've probably done hundreds of times, and I will continue to run them because I enjoy doing so. But at the end of the day, there is just something to be said for that sort of that thrill of adventure and that sort of exploration aspect that we do lose once we feel that we have sort of found most of the routes close to us. Now, when we're running, there's a lot more options for us. There's a lot more in the way of footpaths, especially if you live in this sort of a forest area. And you can loop all of these together, explore this bit of footpath, tag it onto this loop. When I'm out walking my dog, we have our routes. I've probably got about 6-7 routes that we do on the regular. And she knows these routes. A lot of the days, that's what she wants because she likes repetition. Dogs like routine. But if I'm taking out a route and I go, you know what, let's just do a left here and add on a little loop for another sort of 15 minutes. As soon as we turn off of that path and we head down somewhere she hasn't been for a while, the way her ears pick up and she gets a little bit of a pep in her step, we all enjoy going off the beaten track a little bit. And, I think that including this in your training is a really good way to sort of find a more mental stimulation in our training. Now, no matter, how diligent we are with researching all of our options, after 6-7 years living and training in the same place, we're going to have exhausted all the decent options around us. With regards to cycling, I mean, we don't really want to be cycling on dual carriageways or really fast roads. We don't want to be doing anything that has sort of off-road section. Well, at least, serious off-road sections on our road bike. So how is it that we can keep finding new roads? Well, if we have a 3-hour ride in the cards, let's have a look at, how far can I ride in 3 hours? Well, I can average about 30 kilometres an hour, give or take. Right, so let's look at destinations that have train stations about 90 kilometres away from us, that ideally have a direct rail link to bring us back to the nearest station. Why don't we head out there? Have a route builder create us a route, head out to that train station, get the train back. Think of all the extra roads that we'll have there. Think about the sense of adventure that will bring. Yeah, you will have to pay for a train fare, I'm afraid. But it is just a lot more motivating to go, oh, you know what, let's go out and let's really explore a little bit further afield. Come up with all of these routes. I mean, you could, a lot of route builders, you can, even if the train station's only 60 kilometres away, you say, I want to go start here, I want to finish here, and I want a route that's going to be around about 90 kilometres. And it will then create you, add in a little bit extra alongside it. It will then create you a route that will be about 90 kilometres, or you could even create one yourself. If you chat to other cyclists, they'll be able to share good local routes with you by going out rather than just focusing on loops that start and finish at your front door. Go a little bit further afield. The sense of accomplishment that you get from riding a properly long distance and ending up a long way from home, it's pretty good. It's worth it. And with running, a bit harder. But you could look at running somewhere with a bus stop that will allow you to have a bus that will help you get back to the start. It can just be a really sort of engaging, interesting way to mix things up, explore new places. Next up, I wanted to look at things which would give us a bit of a smaller boost. Now, a lot of these others have been reframing our mindset a little bit. But let's have a look at, instead, what is it that I can do in the very short term that could give me a little bit of a jolt, get, as if you're, somebody's performing CPR, see if you can restart things, get the ball rolling again to prevent something from flatlining. Now, for some people, just sort of signing up for a race will do it, especially if it's a race that is, in the sort of the near future. If they have something very much on the cards, that's going to motivate them. That's going to give them the sort of the kick at the backside they need to get out the door, to get training. Some people, if they buy themselves some new kit, that will really help. It could be some new running shoes, a new cycle kit. If you buy yourself something that, especially if it's going to be very functional, like, a new pair of winter cycling shoes, or even sort of a set of mud guards for the bikes, so you can get out and do some riding outdoors. These are things that can massively help your levels of motivation, and it just sort of help you get out the door, might be able to help you get a little bit of momentum going again in your training. Now, don't get me wrong, buying yourself a new pair of cycling shorts is not going to guarantee you motivation for a year. All it is going to be is going to be a short-term fix. But if you combine that with the other elements in this podcast, that might help you just to sort of to refine that, get yourself back into that routine and remind yourself why it is that you enjoy it. For some people who have trained, quite randomly in the past, it may be that following a structured plan is going to be a fantastic way for them to get back into the sport and find that motivation. Because rather than, if their entire training sort of history has been based on, I train what I'm in the mood for. If you're not in the mood for anything, the chance of you actually getting out there and achieving your goals and putting in the time and the effort that you need is sort of relatively slim. Whereas if it's, sort of your second or third year in triathlon and you think, I do want to get faster. Maybe I do need to find, a structured way of training. If you have that schedule to follow, You wake up to an email saying, this is your run for today. That can be really powerful. Ideally, the best way to do that would be with a coach who you then have the accountability with. They've spent the time creating that session, and you want to get out there and you want to make that coach proud. And you don't want to be wasting their time by having them, write all these sessions for you that you're not going to do. That really works for some people, just having that structure, having that accountability. But equally, what if you're the kind of athlete who has spent the last sort of 4 or 5 years being coached and following training plans? Well, for you, maybe stepping away from structured training would be the way to do this. And yes, this is me, a coach, encouraging athletes to potentially fire me or to step away from the products that I offer. Well, that's because I want people to have a long-term, strong relationship with the sport. And if somebody takes a year out from working with me to just sort of do some racing at their own pace, in their own time, target slightly different events, so that they might be able to come back the next year and go, you know what, I'd love to get back to working with you. I've really enjoyed sort of this time with myself, taking on these different challenges, but I want a bit more structure again. I want to rediscover that real potential, or to target a slightly different goal, have a different mindset. I'm all for that. I'd much rather that than somebody feels that they can't do any training or racing without a coach. They become a bit of a sort of a slave to it. Now, coaching, I know there are some athletes who've been training with me for coming up for 6 years now. I am an integral part of their participation in the sport and their health and their fitness and everything that comes with that. But, for some people, it can be quite draining, that feeling of constant accountability. You need a little bit of a break from it. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you are working with a coach or you're always following a training plan, stepping away from structured training for you, that might give you the motivation that you need. Now, it could be that you try to do it sort of your own way. You try to draw up your own training or do it a little bit more sort of how and when you feel like it. And you realise that after 2 to 3 months, actually, I really miss having this coach. I really miss having this structure. I really miss following a training plan. Fair enough, then you can go back to that. But it's worth just doing this a bit differently. If the idea of this structured plan appearing in your calendar starts filling you with a sense of dread, we need to rethink this. It's not healthy to just keep bashing our head against the wall and expecting things to change. But again, equally, have a conversation with your coach if you're starting to feel this motivation wane. If you're starting to, find that the sessions, they're just not really doing it for you. Because, I will write sessions based on helping an athlete achieve their goals, because I'm going to assume, unless I hear otherwise, their performance at their race is really important to them. But if what's actually important to them has changed, then I need to know that so that I can write sessions for them. I'd much rather write somebody a suboptimal plan that keeps them in the sport than have them leave the sport or leave my coaching unnecessarily. Something else we can do is we can raise the stakes. So if we take Ironman racing as an example, because I know that's really popular at the moment, if somebody were to take on sort of a flatter Ironman, a sort of an easier course, such as Tallinn, in Estonia, or sort of Ironman Florida, that they may think to themselves, okay, I've done that, but you know what? I'm not sure if I could even attempt something like Lake Placid or Tenby. If we take on an event that does scare us a little bit, that's going to put the frighteners up us, maybe Ironman Nice with those mountains, that is going to give us a bit of a kick up the jackseat, and that is going to get us out the door doing our sessions because of that fear of failure. If we're just trying to take a bit of time off of a PB, that's not as exciting, that's not as motivating. So I really would recommend, if you're struggling, to take on an event that scares you a bit, that sort of big, hairy, audacious goal. Now, it could be that you decide, I want to qualify for the World Championship. And that in itself, like daring to dream that you could do that, that could be motivating in itself. Going, right, I need to start like quite a different journey relative to training for my first event if I'm going to be able to achieve my goal of qualifying for the World Championship. And you know what? This is unlikely to be something that I'm going to achieve the first time around. I mean, you might, but there's a good chance, I'd say a high chance, that it's going to be a 2 to 3 year project. And if something can keep you in the sport for another 2 or 3 years and really enjoying the process, that's important. But you also need to use this time, as I referenced Kona at the start of the episode, you need to find something within your training that isn't going to simply make you feel that once you complete this goal of qualifying and you turn up to the event and you represent your country, that's not going to be the end of your triathlon story. That you need to find other things out there. And a good way to achieve this, to find new goals, is to look at sort of YouTube, triathlon magazines, to really look beyond what it is that Ironman spoon feeds you through your email list, to broaden your horizons a little bit. Find different areas of training that aren't simply sort of Ironman or sort of your basic races. There's an absolute wealth of events out there. Now, the last thing that I wanted to discuss was sort of potentially becoming a single sport athlete. So, if you are somebody who, they just don't really enjoy the swimming or the running really, and they just enjoy the bike, well, why don't you spend a year being a cyclist and just targeting cycling events? Whether you are targeting Audax events or time trials, whatever it is that's motivating to you, find something that's really going to engage you. And just have a go. Try something a bit different. It could be that you do it for a year and you go, you know what? I'm ready to go back to triathlon. I've really enjoyed this, but I'm ready to go back. Or you may go, I don't miss triathlon at all, actually. Like, I don't miss getting to the pool. I don't miss the run. Like, I just want to be on my bike. I just love being on two wheels. Then do that then. There's nothing to say you can't come back to triathlon in sort of 5 years down the line if you want to. But I'd much rather somebody just sort of becomes a cyclist and stays with that sort of endurance sport active lifestyle, or they become an ultra runner. They want to have a go at sort of seeing what they're capable with over the marathon. It could be that you split your season. I work with a lot of athletes who we start off around this time of year chasing marathon sort of PBs. We have a spring marathon we're building towards, get ourselves in great shape, sort of aim to get under 3 hours for this marathon. And then, after our spring marathon, we start our triathlon training. We might include some cycling and swimming as cross training during that marathon block. We have a real focus on the marathon because, we've done Ironman events. We've done, we've achieved sort of some fantastic things, but we've never really found out what we're capable of in each individual discipline. And taking on a challenge, such as a marathon, or even pushing the limits and going, I want to do an ultra. Could I run for 100 miles? Obviously, there are shorter ultras, but that's something that can motivate and really sort of challenge people. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, but that sounds so difficult, 100-mile ultra. Well, difficulty is what sort of probably attracted us to triathlon in the first place. Don't get to the point where you started off on this adventure of swimming, cycling and running. Then you get complacent with what it is that you've achieved. You found yourself in your little niche where you're just doing Ironman events or 70.3 events or Olympic events. You're just doing them ad nauseum. Continue pushing the limits. Remember what it was like to start something new and how exciting it was and how it really pushed you, how motivating it was, that community that you found yourself in. And try your best to maybe replicate that, but with a single sport. Now, the reasons for somebody losing their triathlon mojo, they're wide, they're varied, they can be incredibly complex. And the fact is, if you're in triathlon for more than 2 or 3 years, you are going to see your motivation levels wax and wane. I do think it's very sort of nice when you see people who are professional triathletes who are very candid about their struggles with motivation and finding the love for things, and sort of how beneficial it is to take a break. And you know what? If you want to take a year off the sport, take a year off the sport. You don't need my permission. You don't need anyone else's permission. If you're feeling burnt out, if you just can't face it, take a year out and see how you feel afterwards. It could be that you feel the same. And you think, well, maybe I have just come to the end of my triathlon journey. Or it could be that you find yourself after a year away more hungry and enthusiastic than you can remember being for several years, because you want to get back into it. You want to get stuck in. You've had that period of reflection. You've done other things with your life and you're ready to commit back to triathlon again. But losing that motivation does not make you a failure. It does not mean you've done anything wrong. It's just that you've changed. Your life has changed. You know, if there was a problem that you were hoping to solve when you started triathlon and you've solved that problem, then it's going to play a different role in your life. Now, I want you to stay in the sport. Chances are you want to stay in the sport. So I'd love if you could find a way to to relight that flame in your heart for triathlon. But you're going to probably need to do some pretty deep introspection. I'm talking like sit down, pen and paper, jot down how you're feeling. Talk to somebody about how it is that you're feeling. Talk about how it was when you how you feel when you started triathlon, how it is that you feel now. What's changed? What were the high points in your triathlon journey? What are the bits you dislike about triathlon at the moment? You know, what is it you feel would make the difference? Now, for me personally, my own training and racing doesn't mean as much to me as it used to. I mean, when I first started out, I was single, living in a tiny room in London. I was craving a sense of community. I was craving a sense of purpose. I was craving self-esteem. And triathlon provided these in spades. Fast forward to today, and well, what's my circumstance? Well, this sort of last year, I should say, in September, I met someone, started dating her. Things didn't work out with my previous partner due to sort of visa issues, but we figured out that, you know, sadly that wasn't going to last. So I met somebody, and we've been seeing each other well since last September, so sort of 14 months now. I'm 36, turning 37 next week on the 2nd of December if you want to send a present. And the fact is, you know, she's the same age as me. And, you know, if we decide that we want to start a family, then this might be our last chance. Obviously, the decision of, you know, whether you want to move in with someone, whether you want to have children with them, it's not the kind of thing that, well, I'm definitely not the sort of person who want to rush into those decisions. So for me, I do feel that I've got this it feels like we're on the clock a little bit. It's not that bad. But it feels that if we want to make this decision, it's got to be within the next sort of couple of years, say. And I just feel that, you know, given the fact that the only real time that we get to sort of spend a lot of time together is on the weekends, if I chose to use my weekends to head out on 3-4 hour bike rides that I was then pretty exhausted and disengaged with her for the rest of the day, or I declined, you know, going out and socializing, going on dates and spending time with, you know, her friends because I needed to get up early in the morning to do a session. You know, this is going to come as a real sort of barrier within the relationship. You know, it's going to, well, you know, what's more important to you? What you focused on? And it's not like triathlon is new to me, and really making a big deal out of training for what will be my 15th, 16th season in triathlon. It's just not as much of a priority for me as focusing on my personal life, my relationship. I've got a mortgage I need to pay, I've got clients I need to support, I've got a dog that needs walking, I've got a relationship to build. These, for me, at the moment are all more important to me than my personal race performance. Being able to take sort of 5 minutes off of my 70.3 time, honestly, isn't super motivating to me at the moment. The amount of sacrifices that I'd have to make, the amount I have to shift my priorities to achieve that, it doesn't add up, honestly. Obviously training would suggest that it's got some real purpose and direction. I'm still swimming, I'm still cycling, and I'm still running. But this last year, it's been pretty sparse for me. But sort of, nonetheless, just because I'm in this situation now doesn't mean it's always going to be like this. You could fast forward, say, sort of 5 years in the future, and if I do find myself in this very sort of harmonious sort of domestic environment, I'm not having to prioritise my time on the weekends so much, and everything just feels a bit more sort of secure. I've got a long-term vision of what I want to do. Then it could be that I think to myself, you know what? I really would like to go out and I'd like to I really apply myself to an Ironman again, or I really want to throw myself at this fitness challenge because this is now what I have the time and the headspace and the energy for. Now, of course, the chances of you being in the same situation as me is very low, but it could be that if there are redundancies coming up at work. It could be that, if you and your partner have had a child recently, it could be that if you have a relative that is unwell and needs a lot of care, if you have older parents, who sort of, they're requiring a bit more in the way of sort of help, okay? These are all things which should come before your performance in triathlon. Yes, I'm still passionate about triathlon. I hope that this comes across in the podcast. That I'm not just wheeling out the same old interviews of the same professional athletes that everyone else is interviewing and asking the same old questions. I'd like to think that, my strong desire and passion and interest and enthusiasm for the sport comes through. But just at the moment, like my own personal performance isn't of massive importance to me. But I know, in fact, I'm certain, I say with 100% certainty, that in future, I will find myself back there again. I'll have the time, the headspace, and the disposable income to really throw myself at triathlon again. Now, I hope that wasn't too personal, but I just think that, a lot of people appreciate it if you are, candid and honest about sort of your own struggles, things that you're going through yourself, and that, nobody's perfect. I don't think I've ever pretended to be perfect, but as somebody who sort of many will sort of look up to in the triathlon space as being sort of a bit of an authority figure, that it's not all rosy, it's not all perfect over here. You all have our own struggles. We're all working through different things. I know a number of coaches, they don't do any racing at all. They barely do any training themselves because they consider themselves to be retired. Now, I think it is still nice to be involved with the sport, but a lot of those coaches who have retired from racing are those who raced at a very high level, and they found themselves at a tempo where they felt that, if they are consistently knocking out, world championship qualification worthy performances, they just go, I can't imagine doing this for the next 20, 30 years. And they step away. They go, that's it, I'm retired. I can't handle the pressure. I can't handle the stress anymore. Whereas I think, again, I know I said this before at the start of the episode, but, if they were to sort of just keep racing, but not as seriously, at a lower level, doing shorter distances, that's something they might be able to keep their hand in, but it's not for me to tell them. Now, it really helps to be able to chat these things through with someone else. So if you wanted to, have a call with me, if you wanted to chat through with me, your struggles, how you could overcome them, maybe you might be interested in sort of, working with me, hiring me as a coach to help you sort of re-find that mojo, that spark in your training. Be more than happy to. My email is down in the show notes. Find me across a message. We can set up a call. We can have a bit of a chat. Obviously, do let me know whether you're just looking to set up like a one-time, a one-off like consultation, chat things through, or whether you're interested in sort of a coaching relationship. Now, I know that some people, they can be hesitant about spending money on these things. Think, I'm not sure I can justify the cost of a coach, But if you think to yourself, if you've got like 10, 15, 20 grand's worth of triathlon equipment sat in your garage that you're not motivated to use, does paying somebody a bit of money each month to help you actually get out there and make use of that equipment, it doesn't sound like a terrible deal to me. Because chances are you don't want to sell it, because that would be accepting defeat. But being able to chat things through with somebody either on a consultation basis or by hiring them as a coach, that can be a great way to help you make sure that you're sort of looking after your investment, you're getting your money's worth out of it, and you're staying on track with your health and your fitness goals. Thank you for your time. I know that episode, it may have felt like a bit of a downer compared to some other episodes, but this time of year it's really common for people to feel like this. So I wanted to share my own thoughts, experiences, tips, experiences with this to hopefully help you sort of pull yourself out of a potential state of sort of losing that mojo, questioning things and finding a way to get back into the rhythm of the training, to be able to find the joy in it again. Because I believe it is possible in the vast majority of cases, but it's not as simple as sticking in triathlon motivation video on YouTube and watching that and feeling like you can take on the world again. You need to re-find your why. You need to reassess why it is that you're doing this and how you can make it work in the long term. Thank you once again for your company. I do appreciate it. And I'm wishing you the very best of luck with your training. I'll see you all next Tuesday morning for another episode.